Welcome, everybody, to the HR Roundtable. I'm PJ Trudeau. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're so excited to have you here with us talking about driving change, strategy, empathy, and execution. Change, something that Marlene and I were just talking about, in that it is ever constant, especially in our world right now. From an HR perspective, I don't think we ever really have downtime anymore. And that change can come in so many different forms. So very excited to have with us today Marlee Carlos, who's an experienced consultant, facilitator, and coach. She spent over 13 years working with government, nonprofits, and educational institutions. She's passionate about developing people and building flourishing organizations. Marlee has helped leaders in the federal government and social impact organizations tackle complex organizational and people challenges. She partners with her clients to evaluate their performance, develop strategic plans, improve operations, and strengthen leadership capacity to change and achieve results. Let me go ahead and turn it over to you, Marlee.
Thanks so much, PJ. It's good to be with everyone. I'm going to go ahead and pull up my slides here, and we'll get going. All right. Well, welcome. My name is Marlee Carlos. Like PJ said, I'm a consultant and a leadership coach, and I really focus on helping organizations and leaders become more effective at delivering results. And I'm really excited to be with you to talk about a topic that's near and dear to my heart, and that is leading people through change. And I wonder how many of you have ever felt like this little dog in the fire when leading change. You sit there, there's change all around you, and you're hanging on and saying, okay, this is fine. Does that feel familiar to anyone? I don't know if you have your hand icon or if you have your camera on, hands up. Does that feel familiar? I see some thumbs. Yeah. So you are not alone. There are others, not only in this room, but certainly plenty of leaders that I've spoken with who are like, this is my day-to-day right now of where change is happening, and I'm trying to just navigate it and figure out how to keep pushing it forward. Many of you, when you registered, you filled out a question or two about what are some of the changes that you are going through right now or that you've gone through recently. And I threw that in a word cloud to see what bubbled up, what kinds of changes were happening. So you'll see big words here on like new was the big thing. So new executive leaders, new systems, there's growth in our organization, there's changes to policy, there's restructuring. There's a lot of complex changes that you are walking through right now. And our goal today is to talk about how do we become a little bit more effective at executing and walking our teams and our leadership and our staff through those changes. Now, PJ and I were talking right before this call about one of the big changes that's happening across society, and that's the disruption of AI. But certainly there are lots of types of changes that are happening every day. So whether that's from the economic changes that are happening very broadly from tariffs or changes in the market and changes in your particular industry, of course, the changes in technology and coming back from remote work to hybrid work to in-person work and navigating that. And some of the changes are just organic growth that takes place. We have small disabled veteran-owned small businesses or service disabled veteran-owned small businesses, for instance, within the government contracting space here in the DC area where I live, that are graduating to being a larger business and competing with a bigger pool of people. Change is both happening to us, but also happening from within. And yet we know that despite all the change that we've experienced, that 70% of change initiatives often fail. And earlier this year, earlier in 2025, Deloitte came out with this Global Human Capitals research report. And they said, they surveyed workers globally and said that 2/3 of workers were feeling overwhelmed by change at work. 49% were concerned that the pace of change was going to leave them behind. And then on average, they're experiencing 10 enterprise changes each year, as opposed to just two in 2016. So lots more changes, bigger changes, more frequently. And we already know we have challenge in dealing with change. And so you can imagine the difficulty, and I'm sure you're feeling some of the difficulty even in that right now. So again, our goal today is we're going to dig into what are some of those barriers and challenges in navigating change on a couple of different levels, which we'll dig into here quickly. How do we lead people through change more effectively? And give you a tool, a framework, and some strategies that you can use and take back with you. And then most importantly to me is that you identify one or two steps or strategies that you want to take and adopt. So it's always great to hear a new framework and a new tool, but it's most important to me that you take something specific that is relevant to your organization back home with you. All right, if we can pull up that first poll.
And this is the
This is the one thinking about a change initiative in your organization that didn't meet its
got it.
goals. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. If you think about that change initiative that maybe made you feel like that little dog in the fire, what was the main reason, that primary reason that it was not successful? There may be multiple reasons, and that's often the case, but what was that main reason? All right, maybe about 5 more seconds to put in your results or your thoughts here.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and share the results. There we go.
All right. So at the top here, the insufficient buy-in from key influencers comes at the top. And then we have a three-way tie from that unclear vision and strategy, organizational obstacles, lost momentum. This actually echoes many of your comments in that second questionnaire. Back down. In the second question, when you registered, that said, what are some of the reasons why your organization struggled? Buy-in was near the very top, over and over again. Leader buy-in, staff buy-in, complacency, not wanting to change, that came up as the primary reason. At the heart of each of these reasons is that people find it difficult to change. It's people. It's not the underlying reasons, not the structure or the system or processes necessarily. Those are important reasons, but the central reason is that people find it difficult to change behaviors, to change their ways of working. So the big bottom line up front, the big takeaway right here from the get-go is that often organizations approach change with here's the data that shows us we need to change. Here's the case for change, the business case. Here's the logic, the structure, the way we are going to change. And they go to their teams and say, okay, here's what we're going to do. And then that doesn't seem to yield the results that we want. Because again, people start with change from the heart and from the feelings. So the big takeaway here, the big kind of pro tip is that people change when what they see evokes a feeling that then leads them to do something different. It starts with that feeling, with the emotion that actually compels us to move forward. There's I think of my own stories where this is 100% true, where my doctor has told me a couple of times in my last checkups, Marley, you need to go and exercise more. I've always found it hard to exercise as an adult because I'm not naturally involved in all my sport activities as a kid. And I hear her and I believe her, and the data shows that I go to CDC's website. It says, yes, you need to exercise this many times at your age. And And yet I go to the gym, I run a couple of laps, I'm like, great, but then I don't go back. So I may start and I believe all the data, but I'm not changing my behavior. And it wasn't until my husband said, okay, I know you want to do this. So let me help and work on this with you. So let's put on the calendar a couple of times a week when you and I will go together and we will run. So it moved from being a data task thing that I needed to do to then a relationship that I got to strengthen while I'm doing the thing I'm supposed to do. So it became a shift from my head to my heart. And that helped me start to adopt the change that was important for me to adopt. So I'd love for you to put into the chat here for just a moment. What do your employees feel when going through a change? So what are some of the things that they are feeling when they're going through a change? Maybe PJ, once we start getting some responses in there, if you can help call those out.
Absolutely. Unsettled, insecure, anxiety, loss, anger, stress.
Yeah, yes. All of those. And I don't know if as you reflect on those, if you also say, yeah, sometimes that was me. I had that anxiety, I had that fear, I had that sense of the unknown, and what if I'm going to be rejected? There is a there was a professor there are many professors who have written on this topic. And so in that, I want to pull out four kind of key fears that echo some of what you're putting in the chat right now, um, that cause us and our employees and our teams to stay in that state of inertia and not want to change. So the first is fear of uncertainty. We are biologically wired to seek the things that are known and to prefer the things that are known because that means that they are safer more often than not. Um, so when we get that pushback of, oh, I don't want to do that, from our employees, from our staff, that's actually part of how we're wired. So we can have a little bit of empathy for that. It's, yeah, when we are in the familiar, we know how to behave, we know how to respond, we know how to act, we know how to perform. It's safer. And so the unknown creates this sense of like, oh my goodness, I'm about to enter into potentially an unsafe kind of setting, and I have to be able to overcome that to move forward. Fear of rejection. In this change, what if I lose my team? I lose my position, the organization shifts, I lose the people that have been a part of my life and in my work experience. And what if I fail and then I'm rejected? Fear of failure, kind of echoing some of that. If I'm an expert in my area, and then you're asking me to do something new, maybe take on new responsibilities, maybe shift into a different position, I am no longer going to be the expert in that area, and I may push back on that. And then fear of trading something for nothing. So these are fears that our employees, as you've mentioned, that anxiety, that uncertainty, that fear of rejection, that they're feeling as they are being told, hey, we need you to change, and here are the ways that you're going to change. And so part of leading change well is being mindful of these fears and helping our staff to walk through them. And the big so what or the big takeaway here is that doesn't start on day one of the change initiative. That starts yesterday. That starts by how we're creating the culture of psychological safety where people can show up and talk about and be heard and have their concerns and their questions validated and know that yes, it's unfamiliar, and yes, it's going to be there may be some big things that are hard and that are going to impact us, but it's a safe environment to experience that and to walk in that. So we're going to use John Kotter's method. Many of you, I know, have worked through change and have worked in your organizations through many change initiatives. And this methodology has been around for, I want to say, close to 30 years. John Kotter is a leading researcher and prolific writer on organizational change. He's a Harvard professor, and he built this change change methodology, these change steps, after observing hundreds, if not thousands, of organizations, and where do they stumble in leading change. And I've broken these into three core stages so you can see the preparing for change, the engaging and enabling change, and then advancing and sustaining change. And before we dive into understanding each of the steps and the challenges and then core strategies for how do we lead people through this process, I want to offer a couple of observations and notes for this framing. So one is that you are doing some of these steps well. If you look at these, it's very likely that you are saying, yeah, actually, we do a great job at communicating our change throughout the organization widely and prolifically and with many voices and many partners. We do a great job at that. Well done. That is really important to acknowledge what your strengths in the change process are, because it's important to lean in and build on our strengths, right? So strengthen our strengths. If you're not certain about what those are as we go through this this presentation, think about like, okay, yeah, we do some of those things, and say, yeah, I want to keep doing that, and I want to identify one or two areas that we can do a little bit better. So, second thing to highlight here is that change does not happen in a linear process. We do not go from step one of creating a sense of urgency to building the guiding coalition to create the vision and strategy for change, and then never go back to creating urgency, or never go back to strengthening and building and using our guiding coalition. The challenge that organizations often face is that they skip ahead. So if you see an organization that says, and here's where we're going to go, here's the new change, here's the big vision, but they never took the time to say, and here's why we need to change, and here's the pain it's going to solve, and not get the buy-in of the people who need to adopt the change, then it's going to experience some pretty rough waters as an organization as they move forward. So it's not perfectly linear. You certainly circle back quite a bit on different steps over and over again, but you do need to hit the steps roughly in that order, even as you're circling back. Third thing to mention, and this is really key, especially when you think about getting that senior leader and manager buy-in. Change often leads to a dip in performance in the near term, whether that's a dip in efficiency or effectiveness, the quality of the output, because you're asking people to do things differently, to learn and to grow and to change the way that it has worked in the past. And in doing that, in the near term, there's often this dip in performance. There's a great book, if you've not read it, it is called The Dip, and I'd highly recommend it. And often your leaders may say, hey, I'm really concerned that that change initiative is not yielding the results that we want. And it's helpful to empower them and empower your managers who are pushing forward the change to say, yeah, you should expect that in the near term. That doesn't mean it's the wrong change. You want to keep pushing it forward. And then you'll see a change upward. You'll see the upward side of that dip after some time has passed and you've been implementing it. And then finally, I want to acknowledge that John Kotter's methodology, 30 years ago, change looked different. Change was slower, there may have been fewer changes. And so while we're using this as an overarching framework, because it contains the bread and butter, the kind of bones of the change method, we're going to be overlaying pieces of design methodology as we think about quick prototyping, quick iterations, learning and feedback loops to push forward change. And then we're going to be thinking through what's the emotional intelligence, the human, the behavioral side of change. So we're using this as kind of the bones, but we're going to be layering on other components of change. And so before we get going and digging into each of these, I want to pull up the poll, PJ, that talks about the greatest area for development. What's the one or two areas that you really want to focus in on and that you need the greatest improvement on in your organization?
The stage of change process.
Yeah.
Okay.
and the greatest area for development one. Yeah.
All right. I've just
The
lost.
the next one. Well, we'll do this one first, and this is great.
Oh, sorry.
No, no, no. That they're worded similarly. So I see one response here. All right, I'm seeing lots of strengths, and I apologize. That was we switched questions on you unexpectedly. So, in which stage of the change process does your organization excel? I'm seeing a lot of strengths across forming that guiding coalition, getting key stakeholders engaged. That's awesome. Developing that vision, creating short-term wins.
All right. I just shared the results to that poll, and then in a minute, I'll go ahead and launch the other one for you. My apologies again.
No, I skipped over this poll and the so that was that was on my end too. All right, let's go ahead and open the other one because I want to see us think about or have us think about what's the one area to really focus in on as we're going through
There.
this presentation. All right, what stage does your organization have the greatest area or opportunity for improvement? Because again, you're doing some things, you just named several of the things you're doing well. So, what are the areas that you want to say, hey, I really want to get better here? Because that'll give you a sense of here's where I really want to focus in on. Maybe I can keep building on my strengths, but I want to get better at these one or two areas. All right, let's give us a few more seconds. I'm still seeing some answers coming in.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and share the results.
All right, thanks so much, PJ. All right, I'm seeing two areas where there's the biggest need for improvement, developing a vision and a strategy and making that a compelling one, which we'll dig into here shortly, and then communicating the change vision. I love that. Those are two that I hear really often. And so let's go ahead and dive into what are those steps of the change process and what are some strategies to walking through them a little bit better. All right, so our first stage, if you remember, is preparing for change. So we're going to take a look at what are those common challenges in the change process, and then what are some strategies. So the first step here is creating a sense of urgency. We've heard this kind of common refrain, if it doesn't hurt, like, or if there's not a problem, like, where am I going to fix it? Or if the pain of staying the same doesn't outweigh the pain of change, why am I going to change? If I don't feel the need for change, then I'm not going to change. There's an organization, if anyone's an NBA fan, so the Portland Trail Blazers, they are a basketball franchise. They're broken into kind of their operations division and then their basketball side of their division. And in the operations side, their leadership said, hey, we want to think about how do we start embedding AI practices and the tool to better serve our customers, to become more efficient, kind of all the big points that we talk about regularly in our organizations. And so when they announced that, you can imagine kind of some of the concern and the fear that we experience as well. It's like, I don't know that I want to adopt this new tool. What's it going to do to my job and so forth. And so what they did is they invited each of their teams within the operations division, so their HR team, their IT team, their finance team, and so forth. And they said, come to a team meeting and bring us a long list of what your problems are within your teams. Tell us where you're feeling stuck. Tell us what takes too long. Tell us what you don't like to do because it's a cumbersome task. Bring us those pain points, and then we're going to evaluate them by what AI's best capabilities are and what AI can help solve for you that will create the biggest impact for you and for the organization. So at the very beginning of the whole process of adopting AI, they were getting buy-in because people were identifying their own pain points. They didn't have to say, oh, here's what we think are your pain points. All their staff members said, here's what all of our pain points are. And that started the process on a better foot because they're like, we're solving your problems at the very beginning, and they involve them at the onset. And then, like we talked about at the slide that talked about the fears that people are experiencing, remember that fear of the unknown, the uncertain, often keeps people in their place and kind of heels dug in. So here is a great opportunity to name and validate those fears. You're not solving for them. You're not fixing all of them. That's not our role, and that wouldn't be honestly authentic and accurate. We can't solve all the fears and all the problems, but we can say, hey, I understand we're about to start something new and it's going to be hard and it's going to be unfamiliar. And I want to, give space for you to ask questions and listen actively to those. But I really want to validate that is a real concern, and we hear it, we're thinking about it, we're factoring that in, and we are going to move forward. But it's creating that space for people to name. Brene Brown talks a lot about this in the fear when thinking about how we handle our emotions. So being able to name gives individuals more agency on then how they want to behave and what choices they want to make, even in the midst of the unfamiliar. The second step here is form a guiding coalition. So this guiding coalition, these are the individuals who are going to be helping to spearhead the change effort, from defining what the vision is and the direction we're going to go, what it's going to look like, how we're going to communicate it. They are going to be some of your big champions, your big influencers in the organization. One of the big challenges here is that oftentimes this is an unrepresentative group, whether it is only led maybe from the top or it doesn't have sufficient senior level engagement. So it's unrepresentative of the individuals who are going to need to speak into and lead and guide the change. Sometimes it's an unempowered group or uninfluential. And so when we think about who needs to be involved in the change process, who needs to be in that guiding coalition, we want to think about position power. Do they have sufficient, is there enough sufficient influence on the in the guiding coalition to help push this forward? Is there the level of expertise from different angles, from different backgrounds, from different departments, from different skill areas? We know that, for example, if we have an IT organization or an transformation, if we have a new system, which some of you were sharing that you were undergoing, it's not just IT that's impacted. It's going to be your HR teams, your business line. It's a lot of folks. And so do you have the representative individuals who can help minimize blind spots and provide good input so that change is working in the right direction for the entire organization? And then you want to ensure that there is sufficient leadership and credibility as well on your guiding coalition. There's a story I heard recently from the book Creativity Inc. If you haven't read, that's a story of Pixar. It's a great story. And early on in their history, they were working under Lucasfilms, and the senior leadership were thinking about what are big ways that we can use computer technology to transform the film industry. Right? They did revolutionary, and they have done and are doing revolutionary things with computers to change and improve our films. And one of the areas was on in film editing. So the leader said, okay, how can we make this process better, faster, more efficient? And they came up with a new tool. And can you guess who was not on the guiding coalition for that discussion? If you're thinking film editors, you're right. They did not say, let's engage our film editors in this whole process of designing this new tool and technology. And so when they rolled it out to their editors, who were used to working with a razor blade to actually cut the film strips, their film editors said, no, thank you. The way we work right now, we're great at it. We are experts at it. We are very efficient. And what you're telling us to do will actually slow us down, and we're quite comfortable. So no thanks. And so that whole new process stalled. So getting the right people on board early on is going to minimize those steps. And then on that team, once you form it, it's no guarantee that they've ever worked together before, that they trust one another. So there is some intentional team building of that coalition that needs to take place. And then finally, some of you were saying that the biggest challenge you're facing in your change initiative is that developing a clear vision, a clear strategy of where we want to go. So often the challenge of a change process is that it's actually not clear, it's not succinct, it's not meaningful of like, what are we going to become? What are we going to do? What are we moving toward? We know maybe some of the pain, but what is the guiding light and that we're moving towards? And so sometimes that statement gets lost in amidst a bunch of words or a long page or many bullet points. So what's critical here is making that vision statement um, a succinct statement. One of the ones I've heard recently that I felt really compelled by was from Points of Light Foundation. They are a national volunteer organization, and they're facing a lot of budget cuts and challenges because of reductions to AmeriCorps funding. And just recently, they came out and said, hey, our big goal for the next 10 years and to 2035 is we're going to double American volunteerism. It's simple. It's succinct. I've remembered it now for the last month or so since they came out with that statement. And it's something that as an organization, it really inspires their staff, their external stakeholders, their volunteers. And so coming up with that succinct, meaningful, purpose-driven statement is critical, not only for the inspiration component, but because you want people to talk about it on a regular basis. In the team meetings that your managers will have once you've launched your change initiative, you want them to be able to say, okay, what's on the docket for this week? What are priorities? How does that link us to our change vision? Let's talk about the connection between your work and where we're going as an organization so that everyone feels connected to it and a part of helping to make the shift. The other core piece here is anchoring the change in a deeper purpose. There's been research on how in the midst of volatility, it is extremely helpful for individuals to say, what is my deeper purpose here? A lot of things may be changing around me. The how may be changing around me, but what's the deeper purpose of my connection to my work? And you can take that to a team level and an organizational level. What's my team's deeper purpose that we can anchor onto while things are shifting? What's our organization's deeper purpose connected to our mission, even while we're changing the how of so many parts of our organization? So I want to take just a moment here and invite you to put into the chat, if you feel comfortable, what is your deeper why, your purpose in your work? How do you think about your purpose in your work? PJ, is anything coming in on the chat?
Nope, we don't have anything.
All right. I want to keep pushing us forward because there's a lot of other steps in here that I want to make sure we touch on. But it's a good question to think about. What is your deeper purpose of why you do your work? And that's going to be a helpful question and topic to bring up within your teams and within when equipping your managers as you're leading them through change to
We
help
did
anchor
have a
them.
response related to your question that said service to members.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that deeper thing that holds you fast and says, okay, that's what's important here.
And the purpose is to guide and empower the employees and leaders within the organization.
Thanks for sharing those. All right, let's take a look at that second component that many of you said was a big challenge in your change process, and that's communications. So we walk through stage one. Stage two of the change process is this enabling, engaging and enabling change. So communications, anytime you read a blog, an article, or you talk to someone about change, the issue of communications is going to be one of the first two things that you hear. There's not enough communications. It's hard to understand where we're going, or maybe the communications are really complex, or actually people are telling me things, but I don't see how it's relevant to my work. It's kind of disconnected here. And so very tactically, what's important is engaging your guiding coalition, multiple stakeholders, your leadership, to be a part of the communication effort through multiple forums. We talked a moment ago about using team meetings to talk about the change, using all hands meetings to talk about the change. You're talking about it on a regular basis because that's when it's going to start to be embedded in the ways that we're thinking and what we know is important to the organization and to the leaders. The next piece here is that communicating transparently. And this may seem obvious of, yes, I'm going to tell my team members about what's happening, where we're going to go, when it's going to happen. But it's not just the telling them what we know. Sometimes it's telling them what we don't know, and saying, yeah, we don't know this piece yet. Here's some of the elements of how we're thinking about it and what's influencing our decisions, but we don't know the answers to all of this just yet. And that's okay. Telling them what is hard. Oftentimes I index towards this. If I want to be optimistic and encouraging and say, these are the good things, and I'm afraid of saying some of the bad because it seems a little bit of a downer on the big picture. But there's an importance of holding both of those together, of saying, yeah, I actually think this is going to be a positive change that'll move us in a good direction. But right now, there are going to be some things that are hard. And that increases trust in the communications that we're giving and in the work that you're doing in the change initiative. So saying the things that are hard, and then saying the things that are not changing. Again, we like anchors to the familiar. And so what are the things that, even though our IT system's changing and some elements of how we work are changing, here are some of the things that are remaining the same that you can hold fast to while we're making some other adjustments. And then creating space and safety for questions. There's a lot of good research out there. Amy Edmondson, I'm sure many of you are familiar with her and her work on psychological safety. There's a great study done by Google and their Project Aristotle that talks about what is it that drives team effectiveness, and psychological safety is top of the list. So having that culture as an organization and on our individual teams throughout the organization of being able to raise questions, being able to speak up and say, here's a concern I have, and being heard and validated and treated with empathy. Again, that's not solving problems, but being able to show up and say, here's my concern, goes a long ways for reducing the fear of what's going to happen to me during my change and during the change process. And then finally, on this stage, another key area is empowering action by removing barriers. If you can imagine an organization that says, we want to innovate and we want to encourage innovation at every level of our organization. We want you to identify things that aren't working and come up with new solutions and test them. And we want to come up with new products for our clients or new services, whatever it may be. But we want to be a culture of innovation. But in our performance management system, it still says you're going to be rated by how your success rate and your error rate. There's a dissonance, right? Because you're wanting me to test and try, but I'm being evaluated, and my compensation and my promotions are based on my specific errors, then I'm less excited about trying to test and increase my error rate, which will happen in the innovating. So these systems that we have in place, which worked in one season of our company and during one vision and one strategy, they may not work when we're trying to shift. So making sure that a lot of those structures and systems and processes, particularly as we think about our hiring, our promoting, our compensation, making sure that those are aligned with the vision that we're moving towards is key. Another component of this is our people, our leaders, our staff, our managers. They may be used to working and having certain skills and knowledge and way of working that worked in one vision and one way of the organization in the past. And you're asking them to shift. This is kind of some of the bread and butter of training, right? And so we need to equip our staff and our leaders with the new skills and knowledge that they'll need to move into whatever the new role is. But the other piece that we may talk about a little bit less is that when we ask people to take on new responsibilities, there's often a shift of, okay, I need to then let go of the ways I've worked in the past. Maybe as an individual contributor, I did these things and that worked really well for me. But when you're asking me to maybe take on some new reports, or I used to manage 5 people, and now you're asking me to manage 10. The ways I worked in the past may not work now. And oftentimes that takes a level of self-awareness and a lot of emotional intelligence to make that shift. And coaching can be a big part alongside training of the skills and the knowledge. It is helping them to uncover what's not working anymore and what are the things that I need to start adopting in my new role. And that coaching can be a big piece of that. And that's a place where I spend a lot of time in my work. And then that celebrating the right risks and growth. There was a McKinsey study not long ago that noted that employees are unlikely to change their behaviors if failure is not an option, right? We talked about that core fear of failure. Amy Edmondson talks about this in her book, The Right Kind of Wrong, another really good resource. But if we are afraid of failing, we're afraid of what the impact will be if I don't succeed when I try something new, then I'm less likely to embrace the new. And so creating that culture of, hey, I'm so glad you took that first step. And yes, you failed, but what did you learn? And great job. Keep going forward. Celebrating that starts to create the shift in mindset of, okay, it's okay to fail. It's not going to be the end of my job. It's not going to be the end of my reputation. And it's actually being celebrated because I learned something that's good for me and it's good for the team as we move forward in this change. So shifting the mindset here is really key. So I want to give us a few minutes to reflect for our own organizations. Like I said, I want you to take away at least one step, one strategy that can be useful for you in your context. So if you have your maybe a Word document or a pen and paper in front of you, I want to invite you to take a moment and think about what is your change that you're experiencing and pick one question here. There may be a couple, and we'll send a follow-up handout with these questions on it so you can reflect on all of them in time. But what is one question that feels most relevant to you right now? And I want to give us just at least a minute of individual time to reflect on it before we talk about it together. I'll give us just a minute for you to pick one, reflect on it. You can write it down if that's helpful. And then I'll give you instructions for how we're going to talk about it together. All right, about 20 or 25 more seconds here. All right. In just a moment, PJ is going to pull us into groups of 3. And maybe if I don't know how many people we have. So if you have one more, one less, we'll just modify it. But you're going to go into your groups, give a quick introduction of who you are, and then the person with the birthday closest to today will go first. And what I'm going to ask you to do is quickly share what was your change initiative that you were reflecting on, and then your response to whichever question you chose to think about. And it may be helpful if you haven't had a chance to fully write down your question, you may want to take a quick screenshot. Either way works to say, okay, what were those questions again? But you might want to take a quick screenshot or jot down the question. if you haven't had a chance already. But you're going to reflect on that with the individuals in your room. And then you're going to have about a minute or so to share. And then I want to invite those around you to listen. Start with that listening posture. And then if you've had a shared experience, share, here's what happened in a similar situation for me. And you're not sharing advice, you're just sharing the experience, because we don't want advice unless it's asked for directly. So you're going to have probably around 3 minutes per person to go through that. And then we're going to pull everyone back together. All right. So again, share your name, share whoever has the closest birthday to today. You're going to start and you're going to share your response to one of the questions.
We have everybody back, Marley.
We are back. All right. Is my screen still showing on your end? Okay, great. All right. We're getting close to the end here. I hope you found those conversations productive. I'll ask you kind of a closing question in a couple of minutes about reflecting on those conversations as well as what you're taking away. But I didn't want to skip over, there was a third stage. And there is so much in change management and change leadership that we could spend days on. And so I do recognize that we're scratching the surface, but I don't want to skip over this because we just had in our group a good conversation that touched on a little bit of this. So I wanted to highlight real quickly the big points here. Next, when you're thinking about advancing a big change, a new system, a new tool, a new culture, a new anything that possibly is multi-year, think about what are those short-term wins that you can show, hey, here's the benefit of what we're doing. And look, I just solved a little problem for you. It might not have been the full change, it's not the full system, but look, I made something a little bit better for you. And especially for those people who are on the fence and who you need to be a champion, this is a key one to think about. What do they care about? And can I solve something for them within the change initiative? So they're saying, okay, I see the value of that. Celebrate that, but don't get stuck on the celebrating. Celebrate and say, and we got to keep moving forward. And here's the next thing we want to solve as part of that change initiative. So you're helping, you're triggering, right, the dopamine in our brains of like, oh, good, something positive happened. I saw a positive change. And so it's keeps the energy up. What can happen when we're doing those small changes, we're doing change after change, and you've mentioned it before, but change fatigue is a real piece here. And so help individuals see what can they let go of in order to move what you're asking them to embrace and what you're asking them to take on. So as much as you're saying start the new, say what can you stop doing, because we only have 100% of us, and if we don't take off something before embracing something new, we're going to start to see diminishing of quality in the longer term. And then increasing agency and autonomy is really powerful here to increase the individual's resilience through change, because it doesn't feel as much that something's happening to them as that they are a part of having it, of doing it and making the choices and the change directly. So where that's possible within the boundaries that are important within that change initiative, giving as much autonomy to individuals is really powerful. And then finally, embedded in your culture, in your language, in your stories, and in the ways you're communicating to your teams. What's important, how we're hiring, what are the values, keep that change initiative in the ways that you operate and in your new norms. So that's a quick summary of kind of that last stage, the things you want to take away. One is that the big thing, people don't change because we tell them that this is a really important change, that it's going to be great for the organization. They change because what they see affects how they feel. And then that feeling can lead them towards making a different decision and changed behavior. To lead change well, we need to start with those cultures of psychological safety, because we're having to overcome these natural resistance, these natural fears of change. We want to invest in our own development as leaders and our managers and other leaders' development of emotional intelligence, of self-awareness, because from that position of self-awareness, we then need our leaders to tap into, to influence, to understand the emotions of our teams and of our staff members. Thank you so much. And like I promised, I wanted to invite you to take just a moment and put into the chat what is one thing that you are taking away from this presentation, whether it was something in your breakout groups that you talked about, something specific, or something more broadly about an idea we discussed. I want to invite you to close out with your reflection. And if there's more you would like to talk about, I certainly would love to talk with you. Here's my information. You're more than welcome, and I would love to speak with you more about your change if that's helpful. But I'll turn it back over to you, PJ. Thank you so much.
Marley, cannot tell you how much we appreciate it. All of this great information, and I will make sure when I do the summary to certainly provide the slides to everyone, and just to thank you for giving us so many different tools and resources. And Brenda has said that reminder to celebrate short-term wins. I think that's so key because we get so absorbed in what it is we're trying to do and trying to deal with. It becomes overwhelming, and we try to do so many large things and so many big things at one time. We forget to celebrate those small wins, which are absolutely so important. Thank you, everybody, so much for joining us today. Marley, thank you again. We certainly are absolutely going to be able to put a lot of these things to use as we go forward. Everyone have a great rest of the day. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye-bye.